don't just want your vote. Like, I want your heart too. I mean, I want to encourage the people of the community, and I want to use, if I was a board member, I want to use this platform to say, like, we've got to treat this as a community, not just an MISD problem. We've got to figure out how to pour into our teachers, how to pour into our kids and the families around those kids to make our city great.
Emily Statton Smith, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate your time. Listen, let's just jump in, right? You are running for Midland's Independent School District School Board.
Yeah.
District 4. Did I get all that right?
You did. That's correct.
Nailed it. 7 districts. You're running for District 4. The election's right around the corner. Why are you running for the school board? What got you motivated to want to run?
Well, I mean, my very most important reason is that I have a daughter that's in the district.
Okay.
And her name is Sylvie, and she's 8, and she's beautiful and amazing. And I want the best for her and all the kids in her class, all the kids at her school. I mean, I think that there's some improvements we need to make, and they deserve to have them made quickly. And I also think there's a lot of positive things happening that need to be built upon. And I think that what we need right now is a parent, someone who is on the ground and seeing it firsthand, that can be a liaison with the board and the superintendent to voice parent concerns really accurately and to just give the district the feedback that a parent has. And I think it's really crucial. I think a lot of times you see people that do this, they have older kids. They have kids in high school because typically that's when you have more time. The fact I'm doing this at this stage in my life is slightly insane.
Kudos to you, though.
Yeah. But the reason that I think it's important to get those younger parents in, I think that where we kind of go off the rails or have in the past gone off the rails is in elementary school. And once you start having those gaps in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and reading and basic math, once you get to third grade, I think is when the prison system comes in and starts counting how many beds they need based on who isn't reading at grade level.
Sure. I haven't heard it put like that, but I can see where you're coming from for sure.
No, I mean, it's actually something they do. They start estimating the number of beds they'll need in the state based on grade level reading.
Wow.
Because there's such a tight correlation. Like if you aren't reading, and I might be wrong on the year, maybe I should fact check myself, but basically it's upper elementary. And if you're not reading on grade level, then you're
well behind.
You're well behind, and there's a very good chance that you will be on what they call the prison pipeline.
Wow. Okay.
So intervention early is really, really crucial. And I think when you look at our failing schools, there's a number of elementaries that are failing. And if I had my daughter in a failing elementary, I would lose my mind. Like I would probably quit my job, be up there every day and be like, well, what can we do to do this better? So I think that if we're going to improve the district overall, we've got to get them solid when they're young. It just all the data shows if you don't do that, it's so much harder if you wait until junior high, if you wait until high school. The odds are really low.
Do you come from the school district? Like, are you a former teacher or anything? Like, I've read you're a lawyer.
Yes, I am. I'm a lawyer. Well, now I'm a lawyer at Exxon. That's a recent change. Before I was a lawyer at Pioneer. What I do has absolutely nothing to do with schools. It does have a lot to do with budgets. I deal with real estate a little, but I have done, I guess you would call it mergers and acquisition work at Pioneer for several years. And then I also help like our surface team. I help with royalty litigation. I help with physical security, like when we have someone threatening one of our employees on a piece of land. And then I also...
How frequent is that?
More frequent than you think.
Oh, man.
Some of these ranchers, I mean, I went out one time and there was a guy who had a gun, but because I was a lady, he put it away, which was very kind of him.
What a gentleman.
He was.
Kudos, sir.
But I've also been threatened by a crossbow, which is interesting.
Was it Joe Rogan? Joe Rogan was in you? Okay, so when you're talking about how your expertise as a lawyer comes in, it's around like policy making, budgeting.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Okay.
And I think too, I have dealt a little bit with the part of the physical security stuff that I do. And when we say physical security, we obviously have cyber security, but with the sheriff's department and with different things like that. And I think on the MISD side for the MISD police, I think there's some changes, some safety changes that we could make that are consistent with the way like big companies or even like the Border Patrol monitors things. Like one thing I think, because as a parent, with all the shootings and things that have happened, and if you're a teacher too, this is your workplace. There's this new element we've never had to deal with before. And I think it's really crucial to figure out how can we make parents feel safe? How can we make teachers feel safe going into our schools? And I think it's hard to do that with just, I mean, the state recently mandated every school needs an officer. And that's great, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably not enough. That's one guy, and a lot of times they're actually dealing with kids in the classroom that are being disruptive that a teacher have pulled out. And so I think that we should look to some of the ways that companies and larger agencies use technology to secure the premises. I mean, at the border, there's a software that can detect a person with a weapon, like a fourth a mile away. And there are school districts, in fact, I know that Martin County is kind of looking into it, that have implemented that same software on their cameras around their schools. Now you have to have like a centralized office with someone kind of going through the pictures because if a kid walks in with a tuba, it might get caught because it's a large item.
Okay.
So you have to have someone that makes sure it doesn't do the automatic call.
Just a little QA there.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But there's a lot of technology that's really it's going to be cheaper than having more people do it, and I think we need to look into taking advantage of it because other districts in Texas are doing that.
Great. So I wanted to talk about elections in general,
Okay.
right? I think we all know how these go, right? Like, so there can be a lot of negativity at times. Like, I think many people would be like, school board, school district, you need to change these things, right? And put it off on that. But like, how can the parents or how can the community get more involved in your opinion?
Well, I think, our teachers and our administration is the first line of defense. You should always have a second, right? And that's us. That's all of us. And so sometimes I hear people complaining on Nextdoor, and I have asked people before, that's really cool. Have you ever gone and read with a kid? Do you want to know an organization where you could spend 30 minutes reading? Because one-on-one time in reading is a pretty effective tool to get kids reading on grade level. Like even 4-on-1 actually is pretty effective.
Okay.
But there's a lot of organizations doing this work and doing it really well. What I'm really proud of is the Education Foundation for MISD. I'm on the board of it.
Hmm.
And I guess there's different ways to help, right? So let's say you have time to give. Rope Youth is a great organization. If you had 30 minutes once a week, they go in and they talk to the counselors at different schools, usually Title I schools, and they say, "Hey, give us some kids that you're worried about,
Okay.
4th grade and up, and we're going to come in with volunteers once a week for 30 minutes at lunch, and we're going to do a little lesson." So it might be for like the Young Gentlemen's League, it might be learning to tie a tie. For the Young Ladies League, we've talked about different like etiquette things, like where's your fork and your knife, and like which one is your water if you're at a circular table.
Okay.
Different things like that. 30 minutes a week, you can come in and make a connection with a child, and a lot of times that connection leads to more. If you want something more in depth, we have great organizations for mentorship. We have Big Brothers, Big Sisters. That's a fairly large time commitment, I think, for most people, but you really get to pour into a kid. You can volunteer if you're into like, hey, let's get these kids in sports. Let's get them off the streets and like doing something productive. Boys and Girls Club is great for that. And lots of people doing good work there. But if you don't have time and you just want to give money, the Education Foundation is really great for that, because what they basically do is they go to teachers and they say like, what do you guys need? And we get to do this really fun thing. There's 2 different ones, but the one that I've gotten to help with that I felt like Oprah. It was so fun. We had donors that gave us money, and the teachers came in almost like Shark Tank, and they pitched the idea to a panel of our board members, and then we get to decide to fund them. And spoiler, I think we pretty much funded almost 100% of them, but
Sure.
because even if we don't have the money, like we'll all be on our phones texting, like, man, somebody help us out. Like this teacher has this cool idea for her
I
classroom.
love it.
And it's so fun, and like they cry, I've cried. Like it's so cool to watch because you see how much they like think about pouring into their kids and what great ideas they have, but sometimes great ideas cost money. So you can fund things like that. You can even help, you can ask Anita if you could help judge it. I don't know if she'll let you because we all fight pretty hard to do it as her board members. But there's also like the Excellence in Education Awards where it's like, hey, we're going to just set up a big area where teachers can come get supplies and gift cards and different things. And
Yeah, I've been there.
yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff that like, and that was kind of a partnership between different groups.
Mhm.
Another cool thing that they're working on right now that's kind of a time money, like kind of coming together. It's almost, they're not calling it this, but it's almost like adopt a PTA. Some of our schools just don't have functional PTAs.
Okay.
And the PTAs are crucial. Like at my daughter's school, we help run, we fundraise for them so that we help pay for just things that they need. Like, we had like a hole in the courtyard that essentially had to be repaired, and we
Mhm.
raised some money for that. If we want to get yearbooks for the kids, that's not part of a school budget. The PTA steps in for that, for lunches for teachers, volunteers for events if they want to do a field day, all of those things the PTA supports. Some of our schools don't really have PTAs. They might have 2 members, 3 members, or it may have just kind of gone by the wayside
Mhm.
and nothing's happening. So for schools like that, they still need the things the PTA does. And the Education Foundation is working to partner with like companies or churches or groups and say, hey, do you want to basically be the PTA for them? Do you want to be the liaison with the principal? And they'll come and tell you what they need. And even though they're not your kids, you can get a background check and a TB test. If you don't have tuberculosis, you can go in and you can help do these things
You're
for
in.
these kids. Yeah. And
Excellent.
it's really cool. It's a cool thing to do.
So what I'm gathering is there's a ton of options for people to
So
get
many
involved
options.
versus just immediately running to Facebook or I I'm so people are still on Nextdoor. Wild to me. But
I'm
I do
afraid
get
of
some
next door.
I get some of those I mean, as our group, as Midland, we put out content and the people for us, it's the people on TikTok. They're like very adamant, right? And I'll talk about that in a second. But so let's skip ahead. It's November. You win. You're on the school board, right? What does that look like? What's your immediate plan of action here? Like, how does that work?
Well, I mean, I think one thing that the people need to understand is the school board, like any board for a nonprofit, does have somewhat limited powers. We can't just go in and do the world. But I think one thing I really would like to look at, because the thing that I think is really a priority is we can't have these failing elementaries. And there are different things that are being done around the state when you have failing elementaries. And so one thing that we've done in the past with some success is we have partnered with different, like basically they're kind of turnaround charters. They come in for 3 years and then they're district schools. They're not outside of the district. Those students are in the district, but it allows for a little bit more flexibility with the curriculum. It allows for a little flexibility with money and things you can ask for financially.
Okay.
And they can come in and they can try to basically give you just a boost of fresh ideas, fresh funding, things like that. And then it goes back to being a regular school. And for a lot of districts, that's been a good option. I know that there's a whole thing between charters and like public school advocates. Like they're usually seen as sort of being opposed to each other.
Why
I
is that?
I mean, I guess I struggle with that a little bit.
I'm a public school kid, so I
Yeah,
don't know.
I mean, I think you have to be careful with them because some of them don't work, right? And
Okay.
some of them can be used to almost privatize public education, and I can see why people don't want that. The beauty of the public school is you send any child and they get an education. You don't get to kick them out. Well,
Sure.
charters can, revoke your contract and different things. So I know there's reluctance and a fear, I think, that they'll take like the best kids and kind of brain drain. I think that fear is there. I think when they're done correctly, that's not what they do. I think a charter that's placed correctly in district is one that serves a group of kids that's not currently being served by the district well. So, like, I'm on the board of the Young Women's Leadership Academy, and those girls are incredible and amazing. And I bet a lot of them, if you threw them into a huge 6A high school, would flounder. It would be overwhelming to them. Like,
Mm.
this is a nice, s- you know, female only environment that they have absolutely thrived. They are absolutely killing it. And I'm not sure if that would have happened for some of these girls in a big high school. So it's just the district saying, hey, there are some kids, we've created these mega high schools. And for some kids, this is not going to work. So let's give them another option that's still a public school. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to do for our kids. And so I think if we have things where they're failing and there are different ways to do that, I think we should look at it. I think we should start looking at it soon, not when at some point, if you fail long enough, the state comes in and threatens to take the school over.
Okay.
Don't wait to that.
Sure.
Let's do it now, because if I were, like I said, if I were a parent and my daughter was in a failing school, I would be rallying the tree. I mean, I would be like, we can't do this. This is unacceptable. We gotta do better for these kids.
Last year, school bond was passed.
Mhm.
And what I read was we're getting, in addition to help with other schools, but like the two big hot button issues were the two new high schools are being
Yeah.
rebuilt essentially on different areas. I think that's great. When I look online,
Yeah. There are a lot of people that don't think it's great.
there's a lot of people that don't think
Yeah.
it's great. And there's a lot of people who are really up in arms about golfing and golf courses. Can you help me understand this part?
I mean, I think if you So I grew up here, and we have been trying to get new high school since I was in high school.
Okay.
This has been a battle, and because our town kind of grew up with Midland High and Midland Lee, and just people being very invested in these two schools, um, since I was in school, we needed a third high school. And so that was the bond that had been presented over and over and over and over and over, and it just didn't pass. I mean, this one may have been relatively close, and in some ways, I mean, it's still a pretty good percentage over.
Sure.
Um, the three high school thing didn't work. So originally when they had purchased Ranchland, it was for, I think, the three high school plan, for the bond that was the 2019 bond.
Okay. So that was technically for a brand new third high school.
Mhm.
Okay. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah. And I think what happened a little bit with some of the members, because so many bonds have just been dead in the water here, I don't really think they took it seriously. Do you know what I mean? I think
Sure.
they were like, cool, you did this, but we leased it back and we're never going to pass a bond here. And then fast forward a few years, and in fact, we did it. And it's mostly, I think, the younger people. When you look at the voting, younger people who came out and voted for this, like people in their 30s, were overwhelmingly in favor for the bond statistically. No matter what neighborhood you were in. I mean, some neighborhoods were very favorable, but like across the town, people who had young children were like, I'm not sending my kid to this high school. I want new facilities. But I think in that interim, I think that the people that were at Ranchland really kind of believed
We'll see.
like it's not going to happen.
Okay.
And so I think what we're seeing now, after the bond has passed, because to me that's a weird time for it to be so. Um, I don't know the word to use for this, but this passion seems to be coming at a weird time.
Okay.
But I think it's because it's a reality now in a way that they really hadn't considered. And I get that I get that the course is pretty, right? It's a beautiful course. I think that there are some communications that could have been done differently, like years before, right when it was bought from the get go. More transparency, more meetings. I don't know if it would have made people feel good, but I think some of the complaints about transparency could have been addressed and pushed back on. I think the reality of where we are now, though, is just it's sold, and I'm not a zoning real estate specialist, but I think the lawsuit that's been filed is probably going to have a pretty hard time. And all it's going to do is cost money and time. I mean, I think they've said every month we delay construction is like the equivalent of $2.4 million to taxpayers.
Woof.
So, I mean, to me, I'm a little puzzled myself on why at this late stage in the game, this is being done. Because I have a hard time seeing how it's going to go forward, and I do think the voters spoke on this.
Yeah.
We
Like I
want
said,
schools
I
for
mean,
the
I don't
kids.
follow the comments too deeply, but and I'm not a golfer, so I mean, I guess
Yeah,
I doesn't affect me all that much. But people are like, no, I have to go somewhere else, and the tea times are, and I'm just like, you're getting two new high schools for students, for kids, right? I feel
yeah.
like there's the uh the bigger positive there, I guess, at the end of the day. But what happens to the current high schools once the new ones are built?
So, and then I'm also on the bond advisory committee, which we get updates. And so I can tell you for Midland High, there's a separate committee that's discussing it. There's been a lot of concern about the auditorium because, like, it's kind of historic. Elvis played there at one point in time.
Oh wow, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
So I know there's some efforts being made with different, like, sort of nonprofit groups to see could we turn that into like a district wide fine arts facility.
Oh, okay.
Now that's not set in stone, and there's a lot of things, funding being a big one,
Sure.
to work through. But I think the vision was like, could it be a place where if your elementary school wanted to have a play and the cafeteria is not big enough, they can reserve this and they can come and do the play in the old auditorium and keep that piece of Midland High history. There's a portion of Midland High that's new, and so that portion, they're looking at different things. I know at one point YWLA, the Young Women's Leadership Academy, was discussed being put there, and also Carver Elementary. But I think, from what I know, all those discussions are ongoing. They could still come up with new ideas. There's nothing determined except that, yes, we want to try to save the newer portion and use it for a school. We're going to look at trying to do something if there's interest from a nonprofit partner to really restoring this, making it nice to save the auditorium. And then I think there'll be a portion that's demolished.
Let's keep going on the communication side, right? Because I feel like when people are uninformed is when they just start, basically making assumptions, I guess,
Yeah.
right? And that's how I think the rumor mills happen. So, like, what's a plan for you to like keep up with communication? Like, what types of channels are you hoping that increase communication to the parents and just to the public in general?
Well, I think that one thing that MISD has been doing better and that I would encourage parents to look at. So I'm not a big Facebook person. I'm of that age, I guess, where Instagram is for me. I'm too
Okay.
old for TikTok, but like too young for Facebook. I don't know. I don't know how it breaks out exactly. But one thing the district has been doing better, I think, is social media platforms. And one thing the PTAs are starting to do better also is utilize those and different apps. I think for the community in general, I think MISD being proactive and telling their story. They have a great communications officer, Lindsay, and for her to be doing press releases when we have wins.
Hmm.
Because certainly there's always a story when it's bad. And
Right.
it's gonna be told, and it's gonna be told not only maybe in the paper, but on next door, and you're gonna hear all of that. But to let out people know too, there's a lot of good things happening. That's not to say we don't need to work on the bad, but it's just like I've never gone to review at a company. Like if I was reviewing one of my an employer or something, and just come in and be like, "You're terrible. You turned in this. This is awful," and not say anything positive.
Sure.
In every other setting, we allow the good and the bad to coexist together. I feel like with our district as a community, we have really veered to the negative, and there are positive stories. I mean, my family's one. To be very honest, I have twin daughters. They're 8. And when I grew up here, I went to Hillender, SJ, Midland High, and that's what I planned for my daughters. Uh, and life did not turn out that way. First of all, having twins, they're very different. They need different spaces. And then also my daughter, I don't want to get into her medical history because that's private to her,
Sure.
but she needs some accommodations in the classroom. And they're relatively simple. But when I talk to other parents with similar issues, they were like, if it's something like you have to put a rug in so she can hear better, different things, public schools are lovely with that. And so we went and we met with people at Fannin. We hadn't even enrolled her yet. The principal there is just incredible. I mean, and the things that they've done for my daughter, I know that when we had her at Hillender, they're like, gosh, I mean, she may need to be in like some sort of special ed program or something. I mean, kindergarten, she's reading, she knows all of her basic math
Yeah.
facts. She just has completely excelled there. But she had people that wanted her to. And we've had just a wonderful experience there. The children there, I can't tell you how kind they are to her. And I can't tell you the parents that are there that we've met through different things, how generous they are with their time and to help you out. So there are a lot of good stories coming out of the district too. And my family has one. I'm not minimizing that other people, they've had children that have been bullied and that they have kids that are afraid to go to school or different things. Like we need to talk about that. We don't need to sweep it under the rug. But again, when you only tell those stories, that's not even half of what the district is.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah,
Podcast.
there you go.
Let's throw that on the ticket there in one of the meetings. I like the reason why we started a podcast is just it's a great way to get information out, and you can have people come across and tell stories, and you can get out information at scale on social media. Maybe not next door. Sorry, next door, but I think it's a good avenue. I'd look into it.
No, I think that's a great idea. And honestly, I mean, it might be cool if you sat down with Dr. Howard. She's really sharp and has a lot of things going on.
Dr. Howard, let's talk.
Yeah, you should do it.
Yes.
Sorry for signing you up for this.
You're starting a podcast
You're
now.
basically committed to coming.
It's on record. It's in video. Um, so my daughter is a first year English teacher, high school kids in a different state, not Texas. Is Midland a good area for teachers? Like, what's your plan for helping recruitment or I guess retention too?
I'm not trying to knock Midland, but I don't know if I were a teacher that didn't have a connection here, I'm not sure this is where I would come, right? Um, I think that the bond is going to help with this actually. I think that, I mean, in business, like we have a relatively new building at Pioneer, well, now Exxon. And when you go and you tour and they're like, here's our gym and here's our, I mean, it matters where you work. It matters how you feel in your workplace. So I think that when we get new facilities that feel safe and clean and you have enough space in your classroom for every child to have a desk and things like that, I think that'll help. I think having a nice work environment helps. It's not going to be the only piece, certainly, because I think another thing is you tend to see when you have a good principal, you get good teachers under her. She recruits good teachers. I think we need to make sure that we hire and keep good principals in the district because teachers like working for principals that have their back and support them and can help them with discipline in the classroom. I mean, I think that's really important. And I think as a community, we need to step up and support our teachers. Like, remember that when you say MISD, what you're talking about is almost 30,000 kids and their teachers. It's not, I think people mean the administration, but that's not what you're saying. And they hear that. And so, one thing that we heard a lot when we were working on the bond was from teachers just how supported they felt for the first time by the community, that there were people out there that cared what their workplace was like, and that they were hearing from people that didn't even have kids in the district that did care about kids in the district, and they hadn't been feeling that way. And I think we have to own that piece as a community that I mean, I don't know. My life is words. I'm a lawyer, right? Like, I deal with them every day. I think about how they could be twisted and manipulated. We need to be more careful with our words, I think, when we talk about things. Not that we can't complain, not that we can't have criticism, but think about who you're addressing. Think
Mhm.
about how you're doing it because it's a hard job to teach. It's a hard job.
They are. I have so much respect for teachers. When my daughter told me that she wanted to become a teacher, I was like, in one sense, I was like, good luck,
Yeah,
because I remember what I was like as a kid. But at the other time, I was like, so noble, right? Like,
it is. It's a calling in
yeah,
some ways. Like, it's a mission. Um, I was an English major, and so your options for careers are somewhat limited with that degree. And I remember telling my mom, I was like, I think I'll be a teacher. And she was like, I don't think you could hack it. She was like, I don't think you're tough enough. Um,
it takes a certain type of person for sure. So kudos to all the teachers out there.
yeah, 100%. But I think too, I think we're doing some interesting things. You know, the thing that's hard in public school is we have recapture, we kind of have a budget and we can manipulate within that budget. But to a certain extent, like, even if we have more tax dollars, they don't stay here. I think one thing that our community partners have been doing really effectively is trying to figure out a way, how do we get more money into our teachers' hands? And so, and principals. So we've had some community partners that have come in and said for our really outstanding ones, like, let's give them a teacher allotment. Let's give them an extra $20,000 because they've improved their classroom this much. Or let's give this principal an extra $20,000 because her school went from a C to a B school. And I think things like that help too. Um,
Yeah, you got to have good incentives.
you do. I mean, it's so crazy. I think a lot of times we talk about schools, like we talk about we need them to compete and we need them to win and all this other stuff. And it's like we have not set them up in like a capitalist environment. They have really kind of limited ways to raise money, to recruit. You can't get rid of students, which I think is a beautiful thing in lots of ways, but you can't just choose the best. And we need to acknowledge that,
Sure.
that they face a really big challenge that like a company like mine wouldn't. I have a lot of things to play with, and sort of our public schools don't.
A lot to think about. This is great, by the way.
I
I
thought
do
it was
appreciate
good.
it. So I saw on your website, like you've talked about potential for positive change with few types of tweaking policies and things like
Yeah.
that. So what are those tweaks? Like how do those changes come quick and low hanging fruit type of effectiveness?
Well, one thing I think Dr. Howard is doing some cool things because when my daughter started kindergarten, it was this sight word reading plan. And like all the science says, like, this is not a great way to teach kids, but it was a whole movement for a while. She switched us back to phonetics, and it's a huge improvement for the kids, for the way they learn. My daughter had started having spelling test again, which I think is great. I would like to see, and the board doesn't necessarily set curriculum. I mean, any effect we have on that is through Dr. Howard. But what I hear from parents over and over is that we all hate our math a lot. Like, we
Is that
hate
the
it.
new math?
Yeah, everyone hates the new math, right? Like it, but
I haven't been a part of it yet.
it's so bad.
I don't get it. It's very confusing, but I also don't have young children. I'd probably be very frustrated.
It's very frustrating. And so, and I know to a certain extent, like they have to choose from curriculum that the state has, they give them like, a buffet, but they don't get to necessarily go get their own. Um, but I think there are things we can do, some things we can push back into the classroom, just like the basic memorization of your times tables, your different things. I think that the new math is very like, we want you to understand the concepts and this and that. And I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes you just have to memorize it and then kind of back into what you know. Uh,
I will agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, and then as a parent, I think the thing that I really don't like about it is it's kind of neutralized parents because we don't understand it. Like they come home with these little like cube things and they're like, we have to represent the tens and the hundreds in this weird thing. And we have to use our number line or we don't get credit. It's weird. It's hard to help with even. I mean, like second grade, I can keep up. By the time we get to fifth grade, I bet I'll be like, I don't know what you're doing. And when you take that out, like you're taking out, it's like knocking the leg out of a table. Like
Sure.
parents should be part of the pillars of your support. Another thing I think that I would like to see policies in place. I think you could address this by a policy because used to all the schools had different curriculum, and now Dr. Howard is like, hey, if you're in first grade here, we're all kind of doing the same thing. Second grade's all doing the same thing. Uh, but one thing I've noticed as a parent too, because we use Chromebooks and technology, I love it for the older kids. For the younger kids, I'm a little more like, oh, I don't know about that. But this is the reality. This is how they're doing it. But it means you don't get a lot of papers home. So as a parent, I'm relying on my first grader to tell me, or second grader in this case now, like, how did your day go? And you know what she tells me? She's like, there's a bug on the playground and it climbed up Adeline's shoe. And it's like, no, 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 no. What'd you do in math? And it's like, math. She doesn't, that's not what she wants to talk to me about. And so then I have to like pull this information out of her. The accuracy is, I would say, with my kid, 50% at best. So if we don't get paper home, it's really hard as a parent to say, like, is my kid getting this unit? I think that we need to have a way for parents to kind of understand the units that they're walking through. I'm not saying all parents are going to work with them, but there was one of the benefits. I know there's a lot of controversy about homework because it can be busy work and it doesn't give kids time to like build their family and blah, blah, blah. But one of the great things about having stuff come home, and maybe it's even voluntary, not mandatory, is that it allows the parent to come in and step in beside you as a teacher and to be working with that child too in a one-on-one setting. Because I know for my daughter, one-on-one, she is much more effective than in a classroom. There's 100 things that she wants to look at and study.
Just so I'm clear, homework's gone?
Homework's not gone, but there has been on the younger grades kind of, I think, a little bit of pushback on they're already there so long because they go from 7:45 to 3.
Okay, that's fair. Sure.
That like let's get it done in the classroom. And I like it from the standpoint of yes, you do have them so much longer than we do. But I also, if my daughter is struggling in something, I want something that kind of lets me know where she is,
And you can work with her.
yeah, and I can work with her,
Right.
and I need to understand what you're doing to work with her.
That makes sense. Okay. I was like, man, they got away with homework?
Oh no, there's still homework. It's I think it's lighter because the day's so much longer. Like I don't know how long you went to school, but I think my kindergarten, this is gonna age me, but like I think we got out at noon. I think those teachers are like, I don't know, y'all
We're in
are
the same boat. Yeah.
like
We're in the same boat.
we're not gonna keep you for over 4 hours.
Right.
Like you can go home to your parents or wherever you're going, but
Get
you're not
out of
here.
here. Yeah, there used to be AM and PM.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's challenging though for teachers too. I mean, we have
And for parents, I guess. Yeah.
yeah.
Working parents too.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you have to balance because I think you always have to ask what's good for the kid first, right? Like
Sure.
parents' convenience can't drive it, but there is a component where if it's too hard for the parents, it affects the child. Um, so I know you have to think about all that with school, and I know there's also kids. I mean, we have for a town with this much wealth, we have a shocking number of children that are on free lunch, free breakfast, and so I know you have to think of that too. Like you got to give them a place to get 2 meals. For some of them, that's the only meals they're getting. I mean, like my daughter's school is a Title I school. They have, I think, over 50% that are on free lunch.
Okay.
And people in Midland don't like to talk about that, and they find it actually hard to believe because I think people get in bubbles and they're like, oil's doing great, everyone's doing great.
Mm,
That's not the whole story of our town.
sure. Not everybody is on that median salary range.
Yeah, and
cap.
if you're doing a job that's not related to oil and gas, but you're paying real estate prices that are driven by oil and gas and by all the wealth that's poured in. I mean, when you look at our housing has come down some, but I mean that's a hard deal to overcome as far as like if you're working a teacher job or at the post office or something.
Sure. We talked about comments. We talked about negativity. We talked about these things. I want to end on some positivity here. I want to talk about some successes or some promising initiatives that you're hoping to accomplish and get done
Yeah.
here while you're on the school board?
The number one thing that I want to make sure is I think it is wonderful we brought phonics back, and I want that to stay. And I want us to, I mean, I think it's great that we have spelling tests. Sometimes I think her words might even be too easy. I think that we need to, as a district, I think we have kids that are bright, and we need to not be afraid to push them a little bit. I think we can do that. As far as the things that I want to see, one thing for a parent is I really do want to make sure that we have comprehensively looked at all of our safety options. Because it's great that we're getting new stuff, but we're still years away. High schools won't be done, I guess, until 28. Is that right?
That sounds right. Yep.
Yeah. Um, and so in the interim, my child will still be in these schools. Like, how are we making them safe for her to go? What are we doing? And to be making sure that we are choosing effective ways to do that, and not making it a prison and putting barbed wire. I'm not going crazy, but I think there are things we could do to improve it. And to me, as a parent, there's no excuse for not taking every possible measure to improve our security.
Sure.
And then also, I think as far as other little policy changes and things to look at, I think maybe setting some different policies on parent communications. There's also little things as a parent that, again, maybe not strictly a board role, but like I would like to see change. Dr. Howard is already doing a lot of this because she's really in attune with like her teachers and her parents. I think that's her gift. Um, but we use an app called Skyward. It's not intuitive at all.
Okay.
It really takes some work. In fact, they teach classes that you can go at the beginning of the school year and sit through to learn to use it. To
Right.
me,
They teach classes on how to use the app.
yeah.
Okay.
They started doing it this year because there were so many complaints. But to me, if that's necessary, like the app is failing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes. Yeah. I do know what you
yeah,
mean.
like it's not a good app. So figuring out how to make sure, because the complaint I hear as a parent from other parents over and over is just the feeling, especially for people that were here. Like my daughter didn't start before COVID, but parents that can compare like pre-COVID to post-COVID is they feel a little shut out of the classrooms. They feel like as volunteers, they haven't fully come back. The communication hasn't fully come back. So to make sure that across the district, if a parent wants to be knowing what's going on with their kid and wants to be proactive, that those measures are in place. I will say, I say all this, and like my daughter's teachers this year are amazing. I mean, my daughter's teachers have been pretty good, but they probably also hate me. I bug them. Like I'll send them messages in the app and be like, Miss
You're supposed to.
yeah, I'll be like, Miss Galindo, I don't understand. What is this number line thing? What's happening? Miss Ham, who was a first grade teacher at Fannin and like the most remarkable teacher, such a great teacher to have, but I probably drove her nuts being like, I don't understand what she's supposed to be doing. Please explain.
Well, you're an engaged parent, so that's definitely the point.
But
right?
I think we want to make engagement easy.
Sure.
And I'm not sure every parent feels that way. I mean, like I said, we really have had a good experience and good teachers. I think it's a lot to put on the teachers to build that in. I think it should be more, it should
Across the board.
yeah, it should be across the board, across the district. And it's something we need to talk about because it seems to be a really common thread for parents of, yeah, you have some parents that are never going to be involved. But when you have parents that want to be, they're still like struggling to figure out how to plug in and how to understand and how to help their kid at home. Because I think really, overwhelmingly, most of us want what's best for our kid. Like we
course.
want to help our kid.
Of course.
And we're not here to blame the teacher. We're here to partner and to do whatever in the world we can to get our kid where they want to be, wherever that is. If that's doing more like the technology roles and going into welding, great. If getting an associate's degree, great. Going to college, great. But we all want our kid to be what they want to be when they grow up.
100%. I agree with you. So as we wrap up, Emily, I just want to ask you a question. Why should Midland vote for you?
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons. First of all, I think when you're looking at someone that's running for school board, you should ask, like, where were you before this race? And my heart was with MISD before this was on my radar at all. I serve on the board of the Education Foundation. I've been there, I guess, 6 years. I have a child in the district. I've been in PTA. I am on the Young Women's Leadership Advisory Board. I also do something called Teen Court. It's a partnership between the district and judges and lawyers where, you know, like if I was a kid and I got in trouble, my parents would pay for me to have a lawyer to get deferred adjudication. This is a process where kids can basically get community service and get those things off their record. So they have a nice, clean record for college. But you get to work with a lot of district kids and you get to work with their, a lot of different programs to do it. So I have been involved with these kids because these kids are our kids. I mean, we can't complain about them loitering or this or that unless you're out there trying to make their lives better, trying to make our cities better. And you can also ask, what would I be doing if I lost? I would be doing the same thing. This is just going to give me a bigger platform to do it. It's going to give me more opportunities to expand that. But this is where my heart has been for a long time and where it's going to stay. Another thing I think that's really useful for the board, and I've seen because I watch the board meetings and stuff, I think as a lawyer, sometimes boards forget what their role is, or it's really easy to kind of like let things get irrelevant, right? Like, this is not in our power, but we're going to spend an hour talking about
Mm.
it. I don't think we've always used our board time efficiently. And I think something that lawyers are great at is like, hey, that statutorily is not ours, or like, we're actually prohibited
Right.
from doing this, and thinking through liabilities, because the unfortunate thing about the way our brains are trained to work, my life hasn't always been this way, but post law school it has, is just your mind is like, okay, that sounds so great, and not to be the negative Nancy, but like, where could it go wrong, and how do we stop it from going wrong? And I think that's something, I've been doing that for, I don't even know, since 2008. Evaluating risk and liabilities too, I think, is really important to keep the board out of trouble. To try to manage community expectations and different things the way that I would do at my company.
Sure.
Because I do think a lot of times what you'll see is that communication can stop a lawsuit, and it can also stop some of this negative chatter online. And so figuring out how to do that effectively, maybe it's not a board meeting, maybe it's like a town hall type situation, to where the community feels like they can see inside MISD that the back office is something they have an inside track on. I think that's something I could really help with as a board member.
So
And also, I have a daughter in here, and she's young, and she's going to be in the system for a while. So, like, I will go to bat for my girls. I will go to war for them, and it'll be the same for your kids on the board.
you're heavily invested, and
Yeah.
I love to
I've
hear
got
that.
like heart in the game. And I
Yes.
don't just want your vote. Like, I want your heart too. I mean, I want to encourage the people of the community, and I want to use, if I was a board member, I want to use this platform to say, like, we've got to treat this as a community, not just an MISD problem. We've got to figure out how to pour into our teachers, how to pour into our kids and the families around those kids to make our city great.
I really appreciate you coming in today. Thank you again. If anybody wants more information or help support your campaign as we're running into the election, where should they go?
They can go to MISD.com.
And you have social media, Facebook, Instagram, all those fun things?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the Facebook is like Emily Statton Smith for MISD, and then social media is Emily for MISD.
Okay. We'll put that in the description. You can click on that and help support Emily.
Yeah.
And again, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you on the next one. Bye.